Welcome to this Optimism Cafe, spiritual solutions in these critical times, optimism and meditation. Charlie Hogg, global meditation teacher, in conversation with the Centre for Optimism's Victor Perton and Robert Masters. Victor Perton here, and I'm delighted to welcome Charlie Hogg to the Optimism Cafe, and to welcome all of you who've joined us on Zoom and on Facebook to this event. Hi, Charlie.
Hello, Vic. Lovely to be with you.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Victor. Lovely to be with both of you too.
So let me introduce you to Charlie Hogg. Charlie is the leader of the Brahma Kumaris in Australia, but he has an incredible global role. So Charlie started traveling in his early 20s, found the Brahma Kumaris, and has lived the life of a Brahma Kumari since then. And he'll explain that a little bit later. But he's in high demand everywhere he goes around the world to teach meditation, to lead meditation retreats, to lead thinkers retreats. So I'll talk about that in questions later, but I went to a fantastic retreat in India in March of last year on spiritual solutions to times of crisis. And a year ahead of the pandemic that we're in, it's obvious that Charlie is a great thinker on these matters. So Charlie, the first question we always ask people in these Optimism Cafes is, what makes you optimistic?
First of all, Vic, it's very lovely to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I'm enjoying this online world that we've all entered, you know, in an extraordinary way in the last month or two. You know, if I reflect quite deeply about that question, I don't think it's external things that make me optimistic. I don't take my cues from certain things outside of myself. But if I really reflect deeply, it's probably what I consider the foundation of life, or a quality life, which is my relationship with myself. In the sense that I often feel that's the first relationship in life. And when that relationship is healthy, it influences your physical health, your relationships, and inevitably that intrinsic internal feeling, how, you know, that vibe you hold in the sacred space of your mind, just how you feel. And if it's healthy, you tend to have a more positive outlook. And I would say a resilience to the inevitable issues and circumstances that every single one of us faces every single day of our lives today, which it's so crucial, because if this relationship is unhealthy, once again, I think it influences each corner of my life, my relationships with others, and definitely that feeling. And to me, this first relationship then creates my lens on the world. I look at the world through a lens, and my perception is my reality. And as we all know, maybe some can be naively optimistic, but I think you can be optimistic and realistic at the same time. But unfortunately, sometimes if that first relationship with me is not so healthy, the lens can be extremely pessimistic, and almost no matter what happens, you will read into it some not so positive result. And so I think personally at the heart of spirituality anyway is this wonderful journey of learning fundamentally who I am and reconnecting to that more positive part of myself. And when that's there, I tend to feel no matter what the external circumstances are, you can maintain a healthy attitude, a positive attitude.
And I mean, that's one of the things, really from the age of 10 or 11, I think there's this almost eternal, who am I? What am I going to be? Where am I going? How do I appear to other people? Charlie, I mean, you've taught thousands and thousands of people. You've listened to thousands and thousands of people's personal stories. So what's the essence? How do you find yourself, and how have you found yourself, Charlie?
Well, how long do we have on this webinar, Vic?
Oh, well, we can go for hours if we want to.
You know, I would say, in essence, that, you know, I grew up in Melbourne, I wandered the world, and I really found that, you know, often we can have self-confidence to do things. And often our education makes me so confident to speak to people, to run an organization. It doesn't mean I fundamentally feel comfortable about who I am. They're absolutely separate. And I find that often we can have this veneer of self-confidence, but inside we're not very confident at all. There's a lot of self-doubt. And for me, I think when I began to meditate, the sort of the intrinsic step in meditation is the realization that there's the permanent self and the temporary self. And the permanent self is the consciousness, if you can say the soul. That's really who I am, but I wear the temporary self. But when I forget the permanent self and only take on my temporary identity, that sort of is the parent, if I can say, of two children, of my ego and lack of self-respect. And I feel that dominates our inner world these days. And I think for me, the more I've tried to reconnect with my original self, the consciousness, the soul, quite frankly, I found an inner peace. I found a mind that can rest. And I think that's really one of the most special things in life, to be able to sit and really take your mind into that sweet place of stillness and silence.
And so how do you and how do people maintain their optimism through the pandemic? You know, when the media is full of fear, anxiety, we've got governments going from democratic to authoritarian. How have you personally maintained your optimism through the pandemic?
You know, I suppose it's the lens that we look through, just like I was saying, because they often say that problems create their own solutions, you know. And if you look through the lens of the problem, it's not good. And we all know that it's a huge challenge, but many people are seeing fundamental shifts in human behavior that may be quite positive. And I think somehow a lot of us complain, and we live in this ridiculous sort of robotic lifestyle. We just wonder where it's all going to end, you know? Work, 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 run, run, run. What's the ultimate result? We all say we need more peace, but when we slow down, I think sometimes it's quite challenging, but at the moment, the world is slowing down. All the distractions are going. And to me, we intrinsically, for a healthy society and a healthy planet, we need healthy minds, we need healthy souls. And I feel the state of our world outside is a result of this inner world of the mind, of the collective mind of humanity. And the collective mind of humanity, unfortunately, I don't think is very healthy. And so I think this pandemic is making a lot of people really reflect, well, what is important? I think that's what is really important? Is it all these transient things which we chase after, or is it something much deeper in life? And so, you know, I think I feel very compassionate because it's challenging for everybody, but at the same time, I feel optimistic that sometimes problems shift behavior. And I would say all of us would love to see a very different type of culture where there's perhaps more love, more respect, more time, more compassion, rather than maybe a culture of a heartless culture, which often we see around us these days. So, you know, I do think there's positives, there's silver linings in all this rather challenging time.
Charlie, last year I attended a global conference which your team convened in Delhi, and we had Anglican bishops and leaders of all sorts of faiths and business leaders and the like. And I just want to share with the audience a couple of things I spotted around the walls of the retreat centre. And One, your leader, Daddy Janki, who died last week. The description of her is a visionary whose uniqueness lies in her unswerving optimism and a heart that is rich with compassion. And of course, the picture on the left there is her with Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who was a great admirer of hers. And on the right, I've just snuck in a photo of my mother and me with Daddy Janki when we met her for the first time. But then little things that I found in the retreat centre, Charlie, in the dining room, you know, there's this plate, feed your mind constantly with positive thoughts. And then in the gardens, when you smile, you bring rays of light into the lives of others. So tell me, I mean, you know, you're the founder of the BKs, I think emerged in the 1940s. How did it develop this essence of optimism?
Yeah, because I think it was set up as a spiritual university. And perhaps, you know, a university is to learn, and that's the beauty of life, to keep learning, lifelong learning. But often our focus is more on the external, and this is a university to learn about, you know, my inner world. And when I begin to delve into my inner world, I think there's so many enormous resources and qualities that we can find there. And that's really what the founder of the university really began to see, that when the inner self, that relationship is not healthy, the effects, the ramifications are around us, which we can see. But when it becomes healthy, it builds a resilience, an incredible internal strength to deal with what is happening outside. Because whether it's relationships or the pandemic or whatever which is going on, you know, where I sit in my life, I just teach meditation fundamentally, but I meet thousands of people all over the world. And I find scratch the surface and there's just deep stuff that people are carrying and we don't know how to resolve. We don't know how to deal with hurts and things from the past. So they just remain unfinished business internally. So the spiritual university is really set up to learn who I am, be honest and clear about my past journey and work through it. So I clear that as a foundation for realizing that my thoughts are the seeds of positive actions for the future. Each thought is the seed, and to take full responsibility. And that's had a huge effect on my life, that no matter how badly someone behaves, I have a choice whether I take it in. I can choose. And mostly we choose to take it in and then we blame. And yet I think spirituality says, no, I can choose. It's not that I'm saying the behavior is good, but I choose not to drink it inside into my inner world. And I think, I mean, I'd be interested once we start to have a chat. You know, I sometimes think of our world as like a thought soup. You know, there's 7.4 billion human beings pumping thoughts into the atmosphere. And what sort of thoughts in the last few months? Unfortunately, and it's not a criticism, it's just such anxious thinking. And there's just like gravity of the world, there's a spiritual gravity that you will absorb it and it will bring you down. We're being surrounded in this sort of soup of sort of heavy thinking, and it needs some resilience to keep my mind like one and try to change the atmosphere to uplift spirits around me. I think it's probably one of the most important things to do at the moment.
Before I draw Rob in to talk about the crisis we're in, one of the things that struck me when I visited your university at Mount Abu in India was the award-winning technology innovations. So you've got the biggest solar farm in India feeding your university, and you know, you've got a kitchen there that feeds 20,000 people on a lunch on a Saturday. So it's pretty amazing. And then as I'm on the board of Yarra Valley Water, which is a water company, and as I walked up the mountain, there's a water treatment plant that is again award-winning. And one of the things that Rob and I and the Centre for Optimism often talk about is that only optimists can innovate. You know, you've got to be prepared to try and fail till you get it right. So I was just utterly impressed by the innovation. And then I visited your hospital up there, which again, you know, is brilliant in terms of delivering Western medicine and Ayurvedic medicine to people who've never had doctors even. So tell us about that innovation. Again, I'd say it's because you're optimists that you're so good at innovating. But tell us about that drive to innovate at the BK Spiritual University.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when the mind is at peace, it can be highly creative, and it has a confidence to try new technologies, not only physically, but mentally too, you know, experiment with new attitudes, because, you know, I really feel that my mind is like the awareness. My attitude propels the awareness and creates an atmosphere. And that atmosphere influences everyone. That's like a technology, a mental technology you can use to really influence. And I really, you know yourself that when you meet somebody who's got a positive attitude or a very light sort of state of mind, you feel light. You know, they uplift you because their thought field is doing its work. So I think when you're in that light space, you have the confidence to really experiment and really combine the oldest technologies of the mind with the newest technologies of science.
Oh, just utterly impressive. So look, I'll go back to you know, when you drew me to that retreat in India on spiritual response to critical times. And I think we had, you know, we retreated for a couple of days, and I said there were people from all religions and occupations. And then we went to the Indira Gandhi Stadium, and there were thousands and thousands of people there. I think I had to stand with 100 people wanting selfies after my speech. And that's an experience I've never had in Australia. So it was about a spiritual response to critical times. And so I think that was very prescient. And Rob is an expert, probably I would say Australia's expert in crisis comms. So tell us about that, Charlie. What is the spiritual response to the crisis that we're in?
Yeah, I suppose, Vic, in a way, when we feel a victim of this situation, and perhaps every human being does, but I think a spiritual response is to really sit in your own resilience, your own self-respect. And even though the world may be dictating all this worry and anxiety, I choose to create quality thoughts still. And to me, the whole quality of my life really depends on the quality of my thoughts, so that I don't feel a victim of the soup, the thought soup, around me all through the media, every second conversation, but I actually choose. And it's very possible when I can reconnect with who I am, you know, my sense of self, I can keep my mind. And I really feel then those little interactions with people are just showing respect, showing love, showing understanding. They have a massive influence. I think all of us know sometimes an interaction with somebody just for a few seconds really touches you. It leaves an impression. And to me, that's a spiritual response, to be in that positive state of mind. You don't have to be naive at all, and I can see the reality of things going on, but I choose to spread a feeling that will uplift spirits rather than contribute to the gravity of sort of the problem, shall I say, or that sort of spiritual gravity.
So Rob, you're a great advocate for positive communications in these times. What's your take?
Well, I think what Charlie is talking about is extremely interesting and has a lot of merit as far as leadership is concerned. And I would hope that what you actually advocate, Charlie, that it does penetrate some of the thinking of our leaders, particularly in this current environment where you've got leadership that is trying to bring about a collective response to a global health situation, but particularly in your own backyard, so to speak, as well. And then you have the skeptics who think that there's a better way of doing it, and therefore they should go out and advocate that. And then when you're looking at it from a communication point of view, as Victor just said, the foundation should be on positive outcomes, optimistic outcomes, but being realistic in all those outcomes. So my question that I thought might be relevant to our leaders, and that is, how do they move into that, or the questions that they need to think about in their own mind about moving into the inner self in these times?
Yeah, Rob, I think that's the most brilliant question, quite frankly, because to me, that's the seed of what we're seeing outside. Personally, I feel what we see in society, what we're seeing in the world around us is a reflection of our collective inner state. And I think it's sort of we've reached a point where this first and most intimate relationship with me is so unhealthy. You know, I might be so educated and I might have a big position, but often that relationship with me is very damaged. And, you know, easily tiny things disturb me deeply, upset me, make me feel angry. And it's like I have no control. I have so much understanding, so educated about the world outside, but so uneducated about the management of the world inside and how to deal with those incredibly powerful emotions that come and those feelings, or chronic negative thinking, or even more that chronic self-doubt, that sort of little person in your head that often is creating so much doubt about myself. And this, I think, what I've learned, no matter who we are, no matter what stature in society, often we go through this stuff. We all go through it in different ways. It's a wonderful conversation, because I think unless the healing starts in the self, like you say, Rob, I personally don't think we're going to see much change outside. And this spiritual university that Victor's been talking about, the fundamental ethic is when we change, the world changes. And, you know, we can do all the temporary bandages on all the stuff outside, but unless fundamentally our human nature begins to shift a little bit, I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of change really happening around us. And that's why, you know, I think meditation and self-reflection combined with positive action is the methodology to move forward. And a part of that meditation is taking responsibility for who I am. Taking responsibility. Otherwise, we palm it off. The finger of blame, the culture of blame is just absolutely rife. But I think that just exacerbates the problem rather than healing the problem. It's a big shift, but I feel the pandemic is almost automatically beginning to shift us towards this new paradigm of seeing myself much more deeply and taking responsibility.
So we promised everyone a 5-minute meditation, Charlie, and I've gone beyond the 15 minutes I was going to open with. But quickly, just tell us, why does meditation enhance optimism? You know, the Dalai Lama and his researchers say it increases the density of the frontal portion of the brain, I think is the physical explanation for it. But you've been doing it a long time and you're an optimist. How has meditation enhanced your optimism?
Well, I would just say, Vic, that you're using the most valuable resource we have, which is our thoughts. Our thoughts, as we know, can take us into a pit of darkness, or our thoughts can lead us into the light, you know. And it's actually learning the art of feeding my mind with a quality of thought that sustains me, sustains the atmosphere around me, and even the people that I'm in touch with too. And I would say that begins with thoughts of my more permanent self. When that relationship starts to heal, I would say that's like the first step of meditation, this relationship with me. And if I can suggest just for a few minutes, if we just reflect internally and hold the image that my mind is a sacred space. Just visualize your mind like a crystal clear bowl of pure water. So still, so clean. The natural state of my mind is peace. But there's gateways into my mind, my ears. I hear comments from outside. I let them in my mind, and they drive my thinking. My eyes. I see bad behavior. I let it through my eyes, and it drives my thinking. My memory bubbles up into the sacred space of my mind and changes my mood. I begin to see that I've lost the authority of my mind. I've become a slave to everything external. The journey in meditation, the journey to return to a more positive or optimistic outlook is to take responsibility for each thought. Each thought is my creation. And when I create thoughts of the permanent self, the original self, these create the highest quality thoughts that bring feelings of inner peace. Just visualize yourself as the soul, the consciousness, the awareness, residing in the front of the brain, in the center of the forehead. I, the soul, am the permanent self. My body is my temporary self. The more I begin to reconnect with who I really am, the automatic byproduct is a peaceful mind. The speed of thought begins to cool, and I begin to experience I am a peaceful soul. I am a peaceful soul. The more I live in this awareness, no matter how much the world around me changes, I am the master of my sacred space. I control the atmosphere and the feeling inside. This is the spiritual power and resilience we need to face these times we're presently in. Meditation is not something you do morning or night. It's an attitude to life. I create peace internally, and I carry it into my work, my relationships, and all my activities. I think at this time we can't underestimate the influence of a peaceful and positive mind in our families and in our world. And thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, that was fantastic, Charlie. God, I do feel at peace with the world. So you are marvelous. We've got some wonderful questions, and I'm going to ask the questioners whether they can join us and speak. And the first question is actually a question from Roland about what happens inside your brain when you meditate.
I was really curious about the kind of things that actually happen in your brain, because I can see a very big change happening when he was doing that. And it's being driven from inside. So I'm interested in the physiology and how that's actually now changing. And I think that connects also to the way we see the world and how that changes our feelings inside.
So true, Roland. You know, actually about a year ago, I was in Colombia in South America, and I was speaking at a conference with Daniel Goleman, you know, the guy who wrote the Emotional Intelligence book. And he's written a book with a neurologist from New York about meditation. I was absolutely amazed. He said in the last 3 years, there's been 3,000 scientific studies into meditation. He said there's no other area of science where they're putting more work in, because his research shows that meditation not only relaxes you, it actually changes, you know, your personality in a positive or optimistic way, if I can say. Now, all the neuroscience of that, he's got a book called Altered Traits by Dan Goleman. It's quite an amazing book. But what the little stuff that I know is that, you know, your quality of thoughts, they measure the brain waves, as you know, and the fundamental 4 ones are alpha, beta, theta, delta. Sorry, beta, alpha, theta, delta. And when your mind is in that active state, you know, when you're busy and your mind is really thinking, that's beta plus. But beta is the normal state of that mind that's really interacting with life. When you are going to sleep, you go into alpha. Alpha 1, you're a bit tired. Alpha 2, yawning. Alpha 3 is between waking and sleeping. Theta is sleep. Delta is deep sleep. It's actually shown that meditators take their brain waves into alpha at will and even theta, which is so healthy for you emotionally and physically. And so when you begin to meditate, I think you start to dabble and get a little bit of that alpha, and that sort of is so good for your physiology. But the more you practice and you live more in that alpha state, you're aware, but you're still remaining calm. I think it's just such an incredible investment in the quality of your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. So I think our thoughts have a massive influence on our body. And I just briefly, I saw some research into fear once, that fear and the heart are connected. And you know that as soon as you're afraid, what happens? Your heart just beats like this, you know. And they were just saying, every day if I go out and I'm afraid whether I will be successful, whether people will accept me, whether I'm good enough, you know, that all those very human fears most of us have, we are putting constant pressure on my heart. And so I often say to people, really, meditation is an incredible investment in quality of life, in your attitude, your mind, but also physiologically. It's a huge investment in your health, I would say. Yeah. So, yeah, I would suggest, if you're interested, a book by Daniel Goleman called Altered Traits, and it's fascinating just what they discovered about when you think in a different way or when you meditate, the extraordinary effects on your physical health, your mental health, and even changes of personality.
The conversation continued for another hour with many questions and interventions from people in Denver and Denmark. So a beautiful global audience and wonderful engagement. But for the sake of making this a manageable length of video, I've edited out that last hour of conversation. If you'd like to enjoy more of these sorts of conversations and learn to become more optimistic yourself, please join the Centre for Optimism. You'll find our website there, centreforoptimism.com, and you can subscribe or join or just browse through the materials there that are available to the public. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day.